April 14th, 1945. The Third Reich is collapsing. The roads of Germany are clogged with retreating columns and desperate refugees. American troops from General Patton's Third Army are pushing deep into Thuringia, sweeping through hidden facilities and forest depots. They have seen the horrors of war, the concentration camps, and the shattered cities. They believe there are no surprises left. They are wrong. In a nondescript workshop near Friedrichroda, soldiers of the U.S. the 8th Corps Force open the doors to a secret hangar. Inside, surrounded by sawdust and industrial glue, sits a machine that defies every concept of 1940s aviation. It has no tail. It has no fuselage. It has no propeller. It looks like a boomerang carved from the future, a seamless, charcoal-gray wing designed to slice through the air at speeds that shouldn't be possible. This is not a rough sketch or a fantasy. It is real. It is armed. And it is waiting. They have found the Horten Ho 229, a jet-powered flying wing, a ghost made of wood and steel. History will later call it Hitler's stealth fighter, a weapon that arrived mere weeks too late to change the course of the war, but decades early enough to rewrite the future of aviation. To understand the sheer insanity of this machine, you have to understand the moment it was born. By 1943, the skies over Europe belonged to the Allies. 1,000 bomber raids were pulverizing German industry day and night. The Luftwaffe was bleeding out. Their standard fighters, the Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The Nazi High Command didn't just need a new plane. They needed a miracle. They needed something that could fly faster than anything the British or Americans possessed, hit harder, and vanish before the enemy could react. Enter Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe. Desperate to turn the tide, he issued a challenge that sounded mathematically impossible. It was called the 3x1000 requirement. He demanded a plane that could carry 1,000 kilograms of bombs, fly 1,000 kilometers deep into enemy territory, and reach a top speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. For the traditional aircraft manufacturers, this was a fantasy. The jet engines of the time, the Junkers Jumo 004s, were fuel-hungry and unreliable. To hit those numbers with such weak engines, the plane would have to be aerodynamically perfect. It would need near zero drag. It would need to shed every ounce of dead weight. No tail, no rudder, no vertical stabilizer. This was the moment Reimar and Walter Horten had been waiting for their entire lives. The Horten brothers were not typical industrial tycoons. They were visionaries, obsessed with the concept of the Nurflügel, the all-wing. Since their youth, they believed that the fuselage, the tail, and the control surfaces of a standard plane were nothing but parasites. They created drag. They wasted fuel. The brothers believed that a pure wing was the only logical shape for flight. They had been experimenting with gliders for years, but the 3x1000 project gave them the funding to attach jet engines to their radical theories. They proposed the HIX, later designated the Ho 229. It was a design so clean, so fluid, that it looked less like a machine and more like a creature of the deep ocean. But building it in 1944 was a nightmare. Strategic materials were gone. Aluminum was scarce. The factories were being bombed into rubble. So, the Horten brothers improvised with what they had. This futuristic jet fighter, this pinnacle of Nazi engineering, was built largely from plywood. The center section was a steel tube framework. but the massive wings were crafted from wood panels glued together with a mixture of sawdust and charcoal. This specific construction method is where the legend of the Ho 229 takes a dark and mysterious turn. Years after the war, Reimar Horten claimed that this mixture, carbon dust and wood glue, was intentional. He argued that the carbon was meant to absorb electromagnetic waves. He claimed he was building a radar-invisible plane, a stealth fighter. Historians and engineers have debated this for decades. Was it a happy accident born of material shortages, or a calculated stroke of genius? In 2008, engineers from Northrop Grumman, the creators of the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, built a full-scale replica of the Ho 229 to test this theory. They placed it on a radar range and blasted it with the same frequencies used by British radar in World War II. The results were chilling. The wooden construction and the sleek tailless shape gave the Ho 229 a significantly smaller radar cross-section than a standard fighter like the Messerschmitt Bf 109. It wasn't invisible, but it was ghostly. Against the primitive radar of the 1940s, the Ho 229 would have been detected much later than a conventional plane. In the high-speed game of interception, those extra minutes of silence would have been lethal. It meant the bat could appear out of the thin air, strike the bomber formations, and dive away before the escort fighters even knew a battle had started. But a blueprint is not a weapon. The machine had to fly. The prototype, known as the HIX V2, was ready for testing in the winter of 1945. The location was Oranienburg, just north of Berlin. The test pilot was Lieutenant Erwin Ziller, a man of immense courage who climbed into the cramped cockpit of a plane that had no precedent in aviation history. Imagine the sensation. Ziller is sitting inside a wooden wing. Behind him, two Jumo 004 jet engines scream to life, vibrating the entire frame. He has no tail rudder to steer. Instead, he uses drag rudders, spoilers on the wingtips that pop up to create drag and turn the aircraft. It is an unstable, sensitive, and terrifyingly fast machine. On February 2, 1945, Ziller took the V2 into the sky. It flew, and it didn't just fly, it dominated. Witnesses reported that in a mock dogfight with a Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter, the flying wing outturned and outran it. The aerodynamics worked. The absence of drag allowed the Ho 229 to glide through the air with terrifying efficiency. For a brief moment, the Horten brothers believed they had saved the Luftwaffe, but the Jumo engines were the Achilles heel. They were temperamental beasts, prone to flameouts and catastrophic failures. February 18, 1945, the third test flight. Ziller is in the air, pushing the prototype through its paces. The ground crew watches nervously. Suddenly, the sound changes. One of the engines fails. In a normal plane with a tail, a pilot can compensate for a lost engine by kicking the rudder hard to counteract the yaw. The Ho 229 had no rudder. The imbalance of thrust was instant and violent. The aircraft began to yaw, dragging itself sideways through the air. Ziller fought the controls. He tried to dive, to gain speed, to restart the engine, or to glide it home. He was a master pilot, but physics was against him. The heavy flying wing entered a spiral. It dropped from the sky like a stone. Ziller deployed the undercarriage, perhaps trying to crash land in a field. But he was coming in too fast, with too little control. The prototype slammed into the frozen earth just outside the airfield boundary. The impact shattered the wooden airframe. Erwin Ziller was thrown from the wreckage. and died instantly. The dream of the flying wing lay smoking in a crater, a tangle of steel tubes and burning plywood. With the prototype destroyed and the Allies closing in, the program was effectively dead. But the production line in Friedrichroda was still active. They were building the V3, the version meant for combat, bigger, faster, and armed with two 30mm cannons capable of tearing a B-17 Flying Fortress in half. This brings us back to that hangar in April 1945. When the Americans arrived, they didn't just find wreckage. They found the nearly completed V3. It was captured intact. The soldiers who found it were stunned by its geometry. It looked alien compared to the Mustangs and Thunderbolts they were flying. Under Operation Paperclip, the secret U.S. intelligence program to capture German technology and scientists, the Ho 229 V3 was disassembled. It was crated up and shipped across the Atlantic, vanishing into the deep storage of the U.S. government. For decades, it sat in a warehouse, a dusty curiosity. But its DNA was already at work. In the years following the war, American aviation companies began experimenting with tailless designs. The Northrop YB-35 and YB-49 flying wings bore a striking resemblance to the Horten concepts. The data from the Ho 229 proved that the flying wing was the ultimate aerodynamic form, but it was too unstable for a human to fly safely without computers. It would take another 40 years and the invention of digital fly-by-wire technology for the seed planted by the Horten brothers to finally bloom. Look at the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber today. Look at its silhouette against the sky. Then look at the blueprints of the Ho 229 from 1944. The lineage is undeniable. The sweep angles, the buried engines, the pure wing shape. The B-2 is a multi-billion-dollar computer-controlled ghost, but its grandfather was a desperate wooden glider built in a dying empire. The Horten Ho 229 remains one of the most fascinating what-ifs of World War II. If the war had lasted another year, if the engines had been reliable, if the fleets of these wooden bats had swarmed the Allied bomber streams, the air war over Europe might have become a massacre. The radar simulation tests proved that the British chain-home radar would have picked up the Ho 229 only when it was 8 minutes away from the target. A standard fighter was visible from 19 minutes away. That 11-minute gap is the difference between scrambling your defenses and being bombed before you can sound the siren. But history is not made of what-ifs. It is made of logistics, fuel, and time. Nazi Germany had run out of all three. The Ho 229 was a technological marvel born into a strategic corpse. It was a weapon of terror that never got the chance to terrify. Today, the only surviving Ho 229 rests in the chaotic silence of the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in Virginia. It is unrestored. Its wooden skin is peeling, revealing the charcoal layers beneath. Its rusted steel frame is exposed. It looks fragile, almost organic, like the carcass of a prehistoric beast. It sits there as a silent warning and a testament to engineering genius unmoored from morality. It is a reminder that the future of technology was once sketched on a drafting table in the middle of a burning world, waiting for the right moment to rise from the ashes. The Horten Ho 229. 9 never won the war, but every time a stealth bomber slips unseen through the night sky, its ghost is flying alongside it.